Marisol Velez ran a small auto shop on the edge of Glenmore Heights. The suburb was aging, tidy, and governed by an exacting homeowners association. Her shop sat in a mixed-use strip beside a dental office. She fixed alternators, brake lines, and whatever kept neighbors employed. Most customers arrived before work, clutching coffee and worry. Marisol never rushed a safety inspection, even when rent climbed. Her office wall held licenses, a faded photo, and an emergency phone list. She had learned accounting at night after years of turning wrenches. The association president, Todd Lanning, first visited with polite smiles. He handed her a flyer about keeping the corridor attractive. The flyer mentioned noise, parking, and approved signage colors. Marisol nodded because the rules sounded ordinary at first. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived citing unapproved, after-hours activity. It claimed her bay lights had been on past 10 p.m. She remembered locking up at 9 that night. The letter demanded a fine and threatened escalating enforcement. You might think a small fee would be easier to pay. Marisol felt something colder than annoyance, like a test of obedience. She called the association office and asked for evidence. A receptionist offered a hearing date and no further details. At the hearing, Todd spoke calmly about maintaining property values. A board member read the violation as if reading weather. Marisol requested timestamps, photos, or any witness statement. Todd said the association had reliable monitoring procedures. The board voted to uphold the fine without discussion. She paid to avoid late fees, then rewired the light timer. Another letter came, this one about grease residue on pavement. Her team used absorbent pads, yet the letter included a surcharge. Marisol started photographing the lot after each cleanup. She placed a logbook by the door for closing times. The shop still did good work, but fear began shaping decisions. One apprentice asked whether the association could shut them down. Marisol said no, then wondered if that was true. On weekends, she visited her mother, who hated conflict and loved quiet. Her mother advised paying whatever they asked to stay safe. Marisol listened, but she also tracked every expense and penalty. A neighbor, Darnell, mentioned his bakery had received similar letters. He joked about the board needing hobbies, then stopped smiling. He had paid thousands over trash enclosure measurements. Marisol asked which businesses got cited most often. Darnell named the laundromat, a daycare, and the immigrant market. He never mentioned the boutique gym owned by Todd's cousin. Marisol began reading the association bylaws after closing each night. The language was careful, dense, and designed to look impartial. Yet enforcement terms gave broad discretion to the board. She underlined clauses about hearings, records, and appeals. A section allowed fines based on vendor reports, without disclosure. Marisol wondered who those vendors were and who hired them. She started to suspect the rules were a business model. The next violation arrived with a photo of a car on the curb. The car belonged to a customer whose battery had died mid-checkout. Todd's letter said, curb parking created a safety hazard for pedestrians. Marisol had called a tow truck within minutes, and she had receipts. The board rejected her receipts, stating the violation was objective. Her bookkeeper warned that repeated fines could trigger lease problems. The landlord worried about attracting attention from city code officers. Marisol promised compliance, then asked the landlord for board contacts. He admitted Todd was influential and suggested staying quiet. That night, she gathered letters across a table like evidence. She decided she would not guess any more about what was happening. Marisol filed a public records request with the county clerk. She asked for contracts between the association and any compliance vendor. She also requested minutes from hearings during the last 2 years. The clerk warned her the process could take weeks and cost copying fees. Marisol paid the fee because information was cheaper than guessing. While waiting, she spoke with other cited owners in the strip. Some refused to talk, fearing retaliation through new violations. Darnell shared his invoices and a spreadsheet of his penalties. The laundromat owner, Sana, showed letters about lint near the dumpster. Sana said the board never cited the gym for overflowing trash. Marisol asked if anyone had tried appealing to the city council. Sana said the association was private and council members avoided it. Marisol researched whether business tenants had any protections. She found state statutes about disclosure and fair procedures. The language promised notice and an opportunity to be heard. It did not promise transparency about evidence or vendors. Todd sent another letter about a sandwich board sign near the sidewalk. Marisol removed the sign and photographed the empty spot. A week later, the board fined her again for the same sign. She attended the hearing and presented photos with date stamps. Todd thanked her and said the vendor report showed continued placement. Marisol asked to see the vendor report, and Todd declined politely. The board upheld the fine and added an administrative fee. You can feel the trap when rules become untouchable facts. Marisol considered hiring an attorney, then checked her cash reserves. Her savings were already tied up in new lifts and insurance premiums. Instead, she drafted a formal dispute letter citing procedural fairness. She mailed it certified and kept the green receipt in her ledger. Todd responded with a friendly paragraph and no policy change. His letter invited her to a beautification committee meeting. Marisol attended and found mostly homeowners, not business tenants. They discussed planners, seasonal banners, and noise complaints about tools. Marisol asked who oversaw the compliance vendor and how reports were verified. Todd said verification was proprietary and necessary to prevent gaming. A homeowner suggested auto shops attracted the wrong type of traffic. Marisol kept her voice steady and asked what traffic was acceptable. Todd redirected the discussion toward curb appeal and safety. After the meeting, a quiet board member slipped Marisol a business card. The card belonged to a property management consultant named Elise Han. Elise later met Marisol at a diner and spoke carefully. She said the association used a third-party compliance company. The company earned a percentage of fines collected each month. Elise said such contracts were legal, but often encouraged over-enforcement. Marisol asked how to prove it without access to the contract. Elise suggested comparing violation timing to board budget needs. Marisol returned to her office and opened the association financial statements. She had obtained them earlier from a neighbor who served on landscaping. The statements showed a shortfall after storm drain repairs. A line item called compliance revenue rose sharply in the same quarter. Marisol mapped her fines against the quarterly numbers with colored notes. The spikes aligned too neatly with the association's deficit months. She waited for the records request and tried not to hope. Meanwhile, a city inspector visited her shop after an anonymous complaint. The inspector checked waste oil storage and asked about outdoor work. Marisol complied and produced permits, logs, and pickup manifests. The inspector found no violation, but the interruption cost her hours. That setback rattled her because it felt like escalation. She asked Darnell if inspectors had appeared at his bakery too. He nodded and said an inspector had measured his grease trap access. Marisol suspected the association forwarded complaints without lying outright. You can weaponize procedure while keeping your hands clean. The records finally arrived in a thick envelope with a fee receipt. Marisol spread the pages across the counter and read slowly. A contract named Sentinel Compliance Services as the monitoring vendor. The contract promised monthly patrols, photographic evidence, and detailed logs. It also granted Sentinel 30% of collected fines. The contract allowed Sentinel to withhold raw data to protect methods. Meeting minutes showed Todd recommending the arrangement as cost-neutral. Another page listed Sentinel's owner as a holding company in town. Marisol searched the business registry and found Todd as a partial member. It was disclosed in filings, but never mentioned at hearings. The conflict was legal on paper if he recused himself. The minutes did not show any recusal for enforcement discussions. Marisol felt anger, then forced herself back to facts. She created a binder with contracts, minutes, fines, and her photos. Elise introduced her to a nonprofit legal clinic downtown. A supervising attorney reviewed the binder and asked careful questions. He said the association could fine, but it had to follow its bylaws. He warned that litigation would be slow and the association would stall. Marisol asked about an administrative complaint with the state oversight office. The attorney said oversight could examine conflicts and deceptive practices. He helped her draft a complaint focused on non-disclosure and incentives. Marisol filed it and notified the board that she expected preservation of records. Within days, Todd sent a letter offering to waive one fine. The letter asked her to withdraw any external complaint and move forward. Marisol read it twice because the tone stayed friendly and firm. You may recognize how concessions can hide an admission without saying it. She refused the offer and requested full accounting of every cited incident. The board replied that accounting would be burdensome and unnecessary. A second setback hit when her landlord received notice of a compliance review. The landlord asked if her shop was becoming a liability. Marisol provided the inspector clearance letter and explained the association dispute. He gave her 60 days to show a path toward stability. Marisol slept poorly and began double-checking every trash bag and light. Her hands shook once while torquing a wheel, and she paused. She reminded herself that fear could cause the mistake she feared. The State Oversight Office acknowledged her complaint and requested supporting documents. Marisol sent the contract, registry proof, minutes, and fine history. Weeks passed, and the association continued issuing small violations. Marisol paid under protest to avoid liens or collection action. She also began recording every board communication in a dated journal. Elise suggested a community meeting with other affected business tenants. They gathered in the back of the bakery after closing. Marisol explained the commission contract, and Todd's disclosed ownership interest. Several owners looked stunned, then immediately worried about retaliation. They agreed to sign affidavits describing inconsistent enforcement patterns. Marisol filed the affidavits with the Oversight Office as supplemental evidence. A month later, an investigator scheduled interviews and requested sentinel logs. Todd announced an emergency board session about tightening enforcement standards. The agenda included a proposal to raise administrative fees for appeals. Marisol attended and spoke during public comment with controlled clarity. She asked whether Todd had recused himself from Sentinel-related decisions. Todd said he followed all required disclosures and served the community. Marisol asked the board to table the fee increase pending investigation. The board voted to proceed anyway, citing rising administrative workload. You could hear discomfort in the room even without raised voices. 2 weeks later, the Oversight Office issued a preliminary finding letter. It stated the commission structure created an unreasonable incentive to overfine. It also stated the board failed to document recusal for conflicts. The letter required the association to revise procedures within 90 days. Todd responded publicly that the association would cooperate fully. Privately, he offered Marisol a settlement covering half her paid fines. Marisol countered for full reimbursement, documented policy changes, and neutral auditing. The attorney advised that a formal consent order could enforce reforms. Marisol accepted mediation only if it produced a public, written outcome. During mediation, Todd maintained the contract was lawful and disclosed. Marisol emphasized the hidden evidence policy and the commission incentive. She showed how fines clustered around budget shortfalls and targeted certain tenants. The mediator proposed full reimbursement, fee refunds, and termination of the commission clause. The proposal also required disclosure of vendor reports during hearings. Todd agreed, insisting the association needed trust more than revenue. A consent order was filed with the Oversight Office the next week. Marisol received a check covering every fine, fee, and documented cost. The association posted new hearing procedures on its website and lobby bulletin. Sentinel was replaced by a flat-fee vendor chosen through competitive bids. The landlord renewed Marisol's lease after reviewing the consent order. Darnell and Sana saw their pending fines dismissed under the new rules. Marisol kept the binder on her shelf, not as a trophy, but a tool. You learn that accountability often looks like paperwork, patience, and refusal.